So we've been back from Kansas City for a few weeks now, and there is one dish we can't forget, or at least I can't, because I don't think Susan cared at all. But that is the Stroud's cinnamon rolls, and we have found exactly one recipe on the internet that walks us through it, and we are going to give that a try. If I were to use a bread maker, it would be virtually effortless, but for the sake of making a video out of it, we're going to do it all by hand. So to start, I've got 137 grams of all-purpose flour that I am just going to lightly sift, and I can't stress enough how easy this would be with a bread maker. It mixes it so thoroughly, it keeps it at the perfect temperature, and if you've bought one since the 70s, you've already maximized what bread makers can do. Why did I stop making bread? Because we kept eating loaves of bread several times a week. That's why. I'm just going to scoop out a portion of this to use later, and into the center of it, I'm just going to crack one egg. You could again use a stand mixer for this. You could use a hand mixer for this. You've got a lot of options, but we are going full low tech. I've got 4 tablespoons of softened butter that I'm gonna add to it. I'm gonna beat that in a little as well. It's not too essential how you mix all this together. We're just trying to make it easier for ourselves later. And all of this low tech is just to say, there's no reason for you not to make these, other than general health reasons. I'm gonna add a half a cup of warm whole milk. This is looking like porridge. My concern is extremely high. But as you'll remember, we've got a fair amount of flour reserved here, so we're just going to slowly add that back in. Yes, this seems like the perfect recipe for a bread maker. So our flour is now moistened and it's starting to almost resemble dough. So we're gonna let it sit for 15 minutes just to rest a bit. So our dough has had a little time to hydrate and it should be a bit easier to work with now, especially since it looks like it's going to be quite a sticky dough. And now we're gonna add a 1.5 teaspoons of yeast, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Gonna give that a quick mix together by hand. Oh my God, it's so sticky. So sticky. Cannot stress enough how simple this would have been in like a stand mixer even. So I've reserved a bit of flour. I'm hoping not to use too much of it, but just going to lightly dust the counter. I'm gonna knead directly in the bowl for now, just because it is soup. We want this to eventually be a smooth dough. So about 1 tablespoon at a time, I'm gonna add more flour. I think we can work with that. So this seems bad. This seems sticky, sure. But it's much better to be too moist and come up to the right dough rather than be too dry. Susan asked me how long this recipe was gonna take, and I was like, 2 hours. So she said 3.5. I guess one benefit to doing all of this by hand is we're gonna make sure it's the right consistency before it proofs. If we did just throw it in the bread maker and we weren't watching it, it could have been a soupy mess and we'd never know. Oh my God, I've been able to lift it. I think I know what happened. This is kind of stupid. So earlier I said 137 grams of flour, but I checked the recipe and I think it said 2.5 cups of flour, which I converted to grams, except that's not the conversion to grams. It should be 120 grams per cup. So for 2.5 cups of flour, that should be 300 grams of flour. We used 137. If you're watching these videos for like good tips or advice, you really should not. But I don't think it's too bad because since we went under, we are going to build up to the correct amount eventually. It's just going to be slow, sloppy work to get there. And we're gonna need this for somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes, I suppose. We want it smooth, we want it supple, we want it to be able to stretch. So we've been kneading for about 7 minutes now, and I'm gonna try the window pane test. Got a little bit of dough. I'm gonna see if I can stretch it thin enough that I can see through it without it tearing. Is that a bunny? That is holding, that is fairly thin. I think we are ready. So into a large bowl, I'm just gonna coat it with grease. Gonna roll our dough into a tight ball. That gets wrapped and we're gonna let it rest for about an hour or until it's doubled. So it has been an hour, and who knows if our dough is doubled because I used a very wide bowl instead of a narrow one, so it's kind of just a guess. But nonetheless, we will move on. So now we need to divide our dough into 15 pieces. While it would be fun to guess and approximate, no one loves to have uneven rolls in a pan. So we're gonna measure. Hey Google, what's 485 divided by 15?
The answer is approximately 32.33333.
So they're gonna be about 32 grams each, which is a little over 1 ounce. So as we are going, I am just rolling these into a tight ball. So now in a shallow pie pan, we're adding 248 grams of sugar, 4 tablespoons of ground cinnamon, and a ½ teaspoon of kosher salt. We're gonna reserve 3/4 of a cup of this, which I should have done in a different pan. And this we're gonna set aside. To a second pie pan, we're adding 6 tablespoons of melted butter. We're gonna roll each ball first in the butter, then in the cinnamon sugar, and then we're gonna set them in the dish in 3 rows of 5. And just like with the breading station, we wanna use one hand for the dry ingredients and one hand for the wet ingredients so we don't make too big of a mess. This is a 9 by 13 inch baking dish that's been lightly greased. It's the most beautiful thing I can even imagine. I could eat that just like that and be perfectly happy. We are gonna let that go for at least an hour. We want them to double in size and to be touching. So I'm just gonna cover that and throw it in the oven with the light on. So these are looking pretty good. They're looking about doubled. We've got the oven at 350 and we're just gonna let them go for about 25 minutes. These look nice and golden brown. So they look great, they smell great, but they are not Stroud rolls yet because the selling point, the main appeal, the piece de resistance is going to be the crispy cinnamon topping. In a bowl, we've got 6 tablespoons more of melted butter, and to that we're gonna whisk in our reserved 3/4 cup of cinnamon sugar. And that looks spectacular. And we are going to brush that directly onto our rolls. And because we have the patience of saints, we are gonna wait 10 minutes before we eat them. We're gonna give that cinnamon sugar some time to crisp up a little bit. So here we are, and I think this is a great demonstration in how you can take, something just easy and simple and basic and turn it into an all-day affair.
Even I underestimated the time. I said 3.5. Well, no, actually, yeah, it was about exactly 3.5 hours. Should we start?
If you're ready.
Ooh, it smells so good.
Do you like cinnamon sugar?
I love cinnamon sugar. Who doesn't? Should we share one?
I'm glad to see that the cinnamon sugar has crisped up a little bit and solidified, because I feel like that is exactly like it was at Stroud's.
I think so, yeah. I was wondering how they did that. And I thought you would have cooked it more after that went on top too.
That butter, salt.
This is perfect. You look just as good.
I feel like the dough's risen really well. I do think I would have left it in longer. We did wait for 90 minutes, which is a lot longer than it was asking for. There were gaps in between the rolls, and I feel like a lot of that cinnamon sugar butter ran into those gaps, and so we didn't get quite as much on top as we did in the restaurant.
That's okay though. It would have been too sweet.
No such thing.
This is really good. Good recipe, good mock recipe.
Yeah, dead on. Fluffy, sweet, salty.
Like cinnamon pillows.
Absolutely delicious.
Oh.
I'm just eating some of the straight crumb.
Trying to make sure he doesn't ruin his appetite before dinner. But this is really good. I'm trying not to ruin my appetite before dinner.
Could just eat these for dinner. No, these are amazing.
Try these. So good.
I would make these again for sure.
Really?
I feel like the one change I would make would be not screwing up the calculations for how many grams of flour.
And using a stand mixer, because we have one.
No, the bread maker. Dough cycle. Perfect temperature. Perfect kneading.
Delicious.
Delicious.
I have nothing else to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Bye.
Bye, until next time.